Heartworms. Ugh, scary, huh? Like the semen-collecting phantom, or the chick shredder. You get the creeps even by hearing about them, without knowing what they're about. Like in many cases, getting to know the facts may help. Just take this mosquito. It's as stupid as a bag of rocks. It knows jack about heartworms, even though it happens to be the vector of Dirofilaria immitis.
The what of the what?
The carrier of the heartworm, intermediate host, to be precise.
And what now?
For all the outward appearances, this is not the most efficient way of preventing heartworm infection. We may get a better idea by learning a little this and that about the disease. The worm will spend most of its life in the definitive host, which is mostly the dog, but for the sake of a brief adventure, it will also make itself comfortable in the intermediate host, the mosquito. So how does this happen? I'm sure we have, all of us, at one time or another, swallowed something involuntarily. Say, a fly in the beer, a hair in the soup, something like that. A friend of mine once swallowed a size 22 nut. He wasn't entirely sober though. Much the same thing happens to the mosquito when it bites an infected dog. Along with the blood, it will also suck in the microscopic larvae of the worm. The larvae, officially microfilaria, but call them little worms, little worm, will spend about 2 weeks in the mosquito. While growing up, they dream about becoming nuclear physicists or astronauts. Well, don't hold your breath on that. After the 2 weeks are over and the mosquito sucks blood again, it will puke up the worms. Being puked up at the right time and at the right place is the key to success. Couldn't be more true of little Dirofilaria. Should the mosquito miss biting a dog at the critical moment, the little worm's career is doomed.
Loser.
In the lucky scenario, however, well, lucky for the worm, that is, dog and master will unlikely find any joy in it. The mosquito bites the dog, and the larva sneaks under the skin through the duct of the bite and continues developing. It wanders along in the body on a journey of spiritual self-discovery or whatnot. At any rate, because of its size, it can't do much harm to the dog at this point. In 2 to 3 months, the violent bastard will break into a vein, then drift into the lung artery through the heart. There, it will give up its childhood dreams and continue to live for the day, sprinkled with hedonism and some Woodstock feeling. In case it has company, and mostly it does, we all know what happens. 6 to 9 months after it landed in the dog, full of dreams and plans, it'll give life to the first batch of kids, some 100,000, so childcare allowance will amount to a tolerable sum. The little worms disperse in the blood, where most of them simply perish after some time, but the chosen ones will replay the big adventure of their ancestors inside the cozy shelter of a mosquito. While splashing about in the pulmonary artery, the adult female worm can grow to a length of 40 centimeters, and as such is an excellent measure of good parking distance from the curb. The real pros, I have to add, take the male worms with their 15 centimeters for a standard. Either way, this length is enough for the worms to reach the heart and thus earn their name. Otherwise, they'd just be called lung artery worms or Jack and Jill, which sounds less dramatic. Unless the dog dies first, the developed worms might live as long as 5 to 7 years, but as retired pensioners, they don't multiply in their last few years. They just play chess in the park. When their time comes, they will find final rest in the vessels of the lungs. They are mourned by Now that we are on close terms with the heartworm, let's have a look at the disease from the dog's point of view. What does it feel? Nothing for quite some time, but as the worms grow, filling the space in the pulmonary artery, the dog gets easily tired. It will cough and be short of breath. By the time the worms reach the heart, the symptoms of severe heart failure will show until eventually. Should we panic? Depending on where you live on the globe, heartworms may or may not be prevalent in your area. The parasite is more common in the warmer climate, but it's slowly spreading towards the colder regions. Its life cycle requires the presence of mosquitoes though, so if you live in Atlantis or in the Arctic, you shouldn't worry. But even in danger zones, a coughing dog doesn't necessarily mean a heartworm-infected dog. Just as people with high fever may not necessarily suffer from contagious encephalitis. But from now on, who wouldn't think of it immediately? At any rate, panic should be avoided, but precaution is advised. It's much easier to prevent heartworm disease than to treat it. What should be done? First of all, we must find out if our dog has heartworms. At midnight, when there is a full moon, a creature emerges from its cave in the Sumatran jungle. The worm-eyed Cyclops tells you the sure thing.
4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42.
Well, yes, he knows the winning lottery numbers as well, but since contact is rather difficult to establish, we have to rely on more practical methods, which unfortunately are not 100% reliable. Diagnosis comes easy when the dog is choking and worms are breakdancing in its heart. X-ray and ultrasound imaging will leave us in no doubt. But heartworms are worth detecting when there are still no or hardly any symptoms, since the chances of survival are much bigger then. There are several ways of finding out. There is an agent shed by the adult female worm that can be shown by a special test from a blood sample. The keywords are adult and female. Males and young worms cannot be detected in this way. A simple yet rather sexist analogy would be that women have an aura of perfume fragrance, while men stink and the children don't wear scent. Baby heartworms, when there are enough of them, can be spotted in the blood through a microscope. This, of course, infers the presence of both adult males and females, or how else would the little ones come about? Yeah, right. What if tests prove negative? Well, let's open a bottle of champagne. Our dog probably has no heartworms. Only you know who can say for sure, apart from pathology of course, but that's a big jump ahead. First, we'd better be happy about the good chance. And second, let's get round to prevention. The vet will readily give you a preparation that will keep off intermediate host mosquitoes, or kill off contagious larvae, or both, making both dog and vet happy. Well, the stuff's not that expensive. Most such products can be given monthly to provide a round-the-year protection. But we're not out of the woods yet. 6 months after the first test, it's worthwhile having another one to make sure the dog did not have a fresh infection previously, which, as we know, the test would not have shown. With the second test being negative, the dog's okay, unless it has a male-only infection. But with no symptoms about, this can only be detected with one method. From here on, the two things left to do are protecting the dog from the infection and having it tested once a year just to be on the safe side. What if tests prove positive?
No.
That kinda sucks. Adult worms have to be killed, which isn't a joyride. Why, you ask? Because we'll be replacing living worms with dead ones, and although it may come as a surprise to some, dozens of 40-centimeter-long dead worms in the heart are just as unhealthy as the same amount of living ones. The vet will perform months of pre-treatment to lessen the effect of complications, and during the actual treatment, the dog is placed under long observation. At times like this, everyone involved is little short of crapping themselves, and a constant drum roll is heard in the background. Heartworm disease with severe symptoms is a special category, and it's really not good. Medication wouldn't just kill off the worms, but most likely the dog as well. But before we go into rage, vomiting, boiling bile, mention must be made of another method, namely dragging the worms out of the heart with the help of long forceps thrust in through the jugular vein. So, yeah. Of course, medication is still necessary, as you can't get rid of all the worms with the forceps. But removing most of the parasites makes each injection seem less like putting a nail in the coffin. To sum up, heartworm disease in dogs is spread by mosquitoes and can result in death. Prevention is easier than cure. Treatment is as fun as pricking hot iron under your nails. Dogs ought to be tested. It'll provide important information for the master and income for the vet, who can now buy that water filter for his pool he always wanted. A cheap one. Everybody will come off well, except for the heartworm, but there has to be a loser in every story. I wish good health to almost all animals.
I just have one question. What the f*** is a semen collecting phantom?
Dr. Eva Falk was kind enough to fact-check this video.